The shot rang out across the dusty street of Willow Creek, Montana, 1878, silencing the wedding crowd as Katherine Spencer fell to her knees, her white veil torn and blood spattering across the church steps. The bride's assailant fled on horseback, leaving behind nothing but chaos and a wedding ceremony in ruins. Samuel Sutherland, a cowboy who had only arrived in town the previous day, broke from the stunned onlookers and rushed to Katherine's side, his spurs jingling against the wooden steps as he knelt beside her trembling form. "Are you hurt, madam?" Samuel asked, his voice low and urgent as he scanned her for wounds. Katherine raised her head, her face partially hidden behind the torn veil that now hung in tatters around her shoulders. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "but he took everything." The crowd pressed closer, murmurs rippling through the gathering of well-dressed townsfolk. Katherine's intended, Harold Fitzgerald, stood frozen at the altar, his face ashen as he stared at his bride crumpled on the church steps. "The wedding money," Katherine explained, her hands shaking as she clutched at Samuel's sleeve. "My father's savings, all of it. It was in my reticule." Samuel's jaw tightened as he helped Katherine to her feet. "Which way did he ride?" "Samuel, don't," the town sheriff called out, pushing through the crowd. "That was Billy Mason. He'll have crossed the ridge by now. No man can catch him alone." Katherine's father stumbled forward, his weathered face lined with anguish. "That was everything we had." "The ranch payment is due next week." Harold cleared his throat, straightening his tie with trembling fingers. "Perhaps we should postpone the wedding until matters are settled." Katherine's eyes widened beneath her torn veil, and Samuel could see the hurt flash across her face. Before he could stop himself, he stepped forward. "Miss Spencer," Samuel said, his voice carrying across the now silent crowd. "I tracked outlaws for the army for 3 years. I can find this man." Katherine turned to face him fully, slowly lifting the torn veil away from her face. Her eyes, blue as Montana sky, were rimmed with tears but held a fierce determination that caught Samuel's breath in his throat. "Why would you help a stranger, Mr. Sutherland?" she asked. Samuel removed his hat, holding it against his chest. "No bride should have her day ruined by a thief. And no family should lose their home to one either." A murmur passed through the crowd. Katherine glanced back at Harold, who had retreated to stand with his parents, their expressions a mixture of concern and calculation. "I'll go with you," Katherine announced suddenly, causing the crowd to gasp. "Katherine," her mother exclaimed. "You cannot be serious." Katherine turned to face the assembled guests, her chin held high despite the tear tracks on her cheeks. "This is my family's future. I won't sit idly by while it's stolen from us." Harold stepped forward, his face flushed. "This is absurd. A lady cannot chase after outlaws. What would people say?" "They'll say she has more courage than her groom," Samuel replied, his tone level but with an edge that silenced Harold immediately. The sheriff shook his head. "This is madness. You'll both get yourselves killed." 3 days, Samuel said, meeting the sheriff's gaze. "Give us 3 days before you send a posse. The fewer people tracking him, the less likely he'll know he's being followed." Katherine's father stepped forward. "My daughter is not riding off with a stranger." "Pa," Katherine said, placing a hand on her father's arm, "you taught me to ride and shoot. You know I can handle myself." She glanced at Samuel. "And Mr. Sutherland's reputation precedes him. I heard talk at the general store yesterday. He's brought in more men than the law in these parts has seen in years." Samuel raised an eyebrow, surprised she'd heard of him. "We leave within the hour," Katherine said, gathering her torn wedding dress in her hands. "I'll change and meet you at the livery." As the crowd dispersed in shocked whispers, Samuel found himself standing alone with the sheriff. "You understand what you're doing, Sutherland?" the older man asked. "You're taking an unmarried woman on the trail. When you return, if you return, her reputation will be in tatters." Samuel watched as Katherine walked away, her back straight despite the ruin of her wedding day. "I reckon Miss Spencer has bigger concerns than gossip, Sheriff, and so do I." 1 hour later, Samuel waited by the livery stable, his chestnut stallion saddled and ready. He'd replenished his ammunition and purchased supplies for several days on the trail. The shopkeeper had been all too happy to extend credit once he learned of Samuel's mission. He heard hoofbeats approaching and turned to see Katherine riding toward him. Gone was the wedding dress, replaced by practical riding clothes. A split skirt, boots, and a man's shirt beneath a fitted vest. Her honey-blonde hair was braided and tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat. A rifle was secured to her saddle, and Samuel noted with approval that she rode astride, not side-saddle as most ladies would. "You ride well," he commented as she brought her Palomino mare to a halt beside him. "I was raised on a ranch, Mr. Sutherland. I can ride, shoot, and track nearly as well as my brothers." "Call me Samuel," he said, checking her saddle straps. "We'll be on the trail together, no need for formalities." Katherine nodded. "Then I'm Katherine to you, not Miss Spencer." Samuel mounted his horse and tipped his hat toward the west. "Mason will be heading for the territorial line. If we ride hard, we can make up some ground before nightfall." Katherine adjusted her hat, squinting against the afternoon sun. "Lead the way." They rode in silence for the first few miles, leaving Willow Creek behind and entering the rolling foothills that eventually gave way to the rugged Montana mountains. Samuel kept his eyes on the trail, noting the fresh hoofprints that confirmed Mason's direction. "He's not trying to hide his tracks," Samuel observed. "He's counting on speed, not stealth." Katherine rode alongside him, her expression determined. "Tell me about yourself, Samuel. If we're to be traveling companions, I should know something of the man I've entrusted my family's future to." Samuel shifted in his saddle. "Not much to tell. I was born in Texas, fought for the Union in the war when I was barely old enough to hold a rifle. After that, I drifted. Worked cattle drives, broke horses, found I had a knack for tracking men who didn't want to be found." "And that brought you to Willow Creek?" "I was following a man, different man than Mason, lost his trail in a storm 3 days back, was about to move on when your wedding excitement caught my attention." He glanced at her. "What about you? Born and raised in Willow Creek," Katherine nodded. "My father built our ranch from nothing. Started with 10 acres and 6 cows. Now we have over 200 head and one of the finest spreads in the county." Her voice faltered. "Or we did. Without that money, the bank will foreclose." "How long have you known Harold?" Samuel asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Katherine was quiet for a moment. 6 months. He came from back east to establish a banking office. He's a good match. Our marriage would have secured loans to expand the ranch." "A business arrangement," Samuel said flatly. "Not entirely," Katherine replied, though her tone lacked conviction. "Harold is educated, well-mannered. My parents approved." "But did you love him?" The question slipped out before Samuel could stop it. Katherine's cheeks flushed. "That's rather personal, Mr. Sutherland." "Samuel," he corrected gently. "And yes, it is, but we might be riding into danger together. I'd like to know if there's someone waiting who'll shoot me if you don't come back in one piece." A small smile tugged at Katherine's lips. "Harold is not the shooting type." The smile faded. "And to answer your question, I thought I could build a life with him. Love might have come later." They rode on as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Samuel spotted a clearing near a stream as dusk approached. "We'll make camp here," he said, dismounting. "There's water for the horses and shelter from the wind." Katherine slid from her saddle with practiced ease. "I'll gather wood for a fire." As she moved through the trees collecting branches, Samuel unsaddled the horses and set out their bedrolls on opposite sides of where the fire would be. He was laying out jerky and hardtack when Katherine returned, arms full of firewood. "You seem at home in the wilderness," he commented as she expertly arranged the wood. "My brothers and I would camp in the hills during roundup season," she explained. "Pa believed girls should learn the same skills as boys if they were to survive out west." "Your pa sounds like a wise man." Katherine struck a match and carefully lit the kindling. "He is, which is why I can't fail him now." As darkness fell, they sat on opposite sides of the fire. the flames casting long shadows across their faces. Katherine had removed her hat, and Samuel found himself captivated by the way the firelight played across her features, highlighting the determination in her eyes. "You should rest," he said finally. "We have a hard ride tomorrow." Katherine nodded but made no move toward her bedroll. "Can I ask you something, Samuel?" "Of course." "Why did you really volunteer to help me? You don't know me or my family. That money means nothing to you." Samuel stared into the flames for a long moment. "I've spent most of my life drifting from one place to another, following trails that led nowhere important. When I saw you on those church steps with your veil torn and your wedding in ruins." He paused, searching for words. "I saw someone who needed help, real help. Not many chances for a man like me to do something that matters." Katherine studied him across the fire, her expression softening. "I think you're a better man than you give yourself credit for, Samuel Sutherland." He gave a self-deprecating smile. "Get some sleep, Katherine. Dawn comes early in these hills." As the night deepened, Samuel took first watch, listening to the gentle sounds of Katherine's breathing as she slept. He studied the stars, pondering the strange twist of fate that had brought him to Willow Creek on the very day of Katherine's wedding. He wasn't a man who believed in destiny, yet something about this woman and this chase felt significant in a way his life hadn't for years. Morning came with a chill in the air. Samuel awoke to find Katherine already up, tending to the horses and rekindling the fire. "You should have woken me," he said, sitting up. "You looked peaceful," she replied, handing him a cup of coffee, "and I'm used to early mornings on the ranch." They ate a quick breakfast of jerky and the last of the bread Katherine had packed. As they saddled the horses, Samuel noted fresh tracks heading west. "Someone passed by in the night," he said, kneeling to examine the prints. "Heavy horse carrying a man about Mason's size." "He's still heading for the territorial line." "How far ahead is he?" Katherine asked, tightening her saddle cinch. "Half a day, maybe less. He's pushing his horse hard." Samuel mounted his stallion, "Which means we need to push harder." They rode at a grueling pace throughout the morning, following Mason's trail across a river and into increasingly rough terrain. By midday, the tracks were fresher, and Samuel could sense they were gaining ground. "He's slowing down," Samuel observed as they paused to water the horses at a small creek. "His horse is tiring." Katherine wiped sweat from her brow. "How much farther to the territorial line?" "Another day's ride, at least, but I don't think he's heading straight there anymore." Samuel pointed to where the tracks veered north. "He's changed course. There's an old mining town up that way, Deadwood Gulch, abandoned years ago, but outlaws sometimes use it as a hideout." "You think he's meeting someone?" Katherine asked, concern edging her voice. "Possibly. Or he needs a place to rest his horse before making the final push across the border." Samuel refilled his canteen. "Either way, it gives us a chance to catch up." They continued north, the landscape growing more rugged as they climbed higher into the hills. By late afternoon, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. "Storm coming," Samuel warned. "We need to find shelter before it hits." Katherine pointed to a rocky outcropping ahead. "There, looks like there might be caves." They urged their horses forward, reaching the rocks just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. Samuel quickly found a shallow cave, deep enough to shelter them and the horses from the worst of the storm. As thunder crashed overhead, they huddled inside, watching sheets of rain cascade down the cave entrance. The temperature dropped rapidly and Katherine shivered despite her coat. "Here," Samuel said, removing his duster and draping it around her shoulders. "Can't have you catching cold." "Thank you," she said, pulling the coat tighter. "But what about you?" Samuel smiled. "I've weathered worse." The storm raged for hours, trapping them in the cave as darkness fell. Samuel managed to start a small fire using dry brush he found deeper in the cave, providing them with light and a little warmth. "This will slow Mason down too," Katherine said, watching the rain. "If he's caught out in this, he won't be going anywhere." "True, but it's washing away his tracks." "Once this passes, we'll have to guess which way he went." Katherine was quiet for a moment. Tell me more about your tracking days. How did you learn? Samuel settled back against the cave wall. My grandfather was Cherokee, taught me to read sign before I could read words. After the war, those skills kept me alive. The war must have been terrible, Katherine said softly. You were so young. Too young to understand what I was fighting for at first, Samuel admitted. By the end, I understood all too well. He stared into the flames. Lost my brother at Gettysburg. He was only 19. Katherine moved closer, her shoulder brushing his. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Is that why you drift? Because of what you lost in the war, Samuel considered her question. Maybe. Or maybe I just never found a reason to stay in one place. No family waiting somewhere, no sweetheart, he shook his head, just me and my horse, simpler that way. Katherine studied his profile in the firelight. Sounds lonely. Sometimes, he acknowledged. What about you? Did you really want to marry Harold, or was it just to save the ranch, she sighed, pulling her knees to her chest. Both, I suppose. I want to save my family's land, and I want. She hesitated. I want what my parents have. They married for love, and it's carried them through hard times. I thought perhaps Harold and I might find that eventually. But you weren't sure. No, she admitted. I wasn't sure. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. Outside, the storm was beginning to subside, the thunder more distant now. We should try to get some sleep, Samuel said finally. Storm should be clear by morning. Katherine nodded but made no move to retreat to her bedroll. Samuel, thank you, not just for helping me track Mason, but for treating me like a person with her own mind. Harold never did that. Their eyes met across the dying fire, and Samuel felt something shift between them, a connection forming that went beyond their shared purpose. Before he could respond, Katherine leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. Good night, Samuel, she whispered, retreating to her bedroll. Samuel sat for a long time after she had fallen asleep, watching the rain and touching the spot where her lips had brushed his skin. He was treading dangerous ground, developing feelings for a woman who, technically, belonged to another man. Yet as he finally lay down to sleep, he couldn't bring himself to regret the path he found himself on. Morning broke clear and cool, the storm having washed the world clean. They set out at first light, heading toward Deadwood Gulch. Without tracks to follow, Samuel relied on his knowledge of outlaw habits and the terrain. Mason's horse was tired, he explained as they rode. He'd have sought shelter during the storm, same as us. But he'll be moving again now, and Deadwood Gulch is the only place for miles that offers both shelter and supplies. Katherine nodded, her expression determined. How many hours to get there? If we push hard, we can reach it by midday. The landscape grew increasingly wild as they climbed higher into the hills. Pines gave way to rocky outcroppings, and the trail narrowed dangerously in places. Katherine rode confidently, handling the difficult terrain with the skill of someone raised in the saddle. As they crested a ridge around noon, Samuel raised his hand for a halt. Below them, nestled in a narrow valley, lay the remains of Deadwood Gulch. A dozen weathered buildings lined a single dirt street, their windows dark and empty. At the far end stood a two-story structure that had once been a saloon. There, Samuel whispered, pointing to a hitching post where a single horse was tethered. That's his mount. Katherine's fingers tightened on her reins. Is he alone? Samuel scanned the ghost town carefully. Can't tell from here. We'll approach from behind the buildings. Leave the horses in those trees and go in on foot. They dismounted and secured their horses, then drew their weapons. Samuel carried his Winchester rifle, while Katherine checked the load in her father's revolver. Stay behind me, Samuel instructed as they began their descent. If anything happens, don't hesitate to shoot. I won't, Katherine assured him, her voice steady despite the danger ahead. They moved silently through the trees until they reached the back of the buildings. Samuel led Katherine from one structure to another, pausing to listen at each. The town was eerily quiet, the only sound the occasional creak of weathered wood in the breeze. As they approached the saloon, Samuel heard voices from inside. He motioned for Katherine to stay back, then crept to a dirty window and peered in. Billy Mason sat at a table inside, counting money, Katherine's wedding money. But he wasn't alone. Two other men were with him, rough-looking characters with guns at their hips. Samuel retreated to Katherine's side. "He's in there, but he's got company." Two men, both armed. Katherine's face paled slightly, but her resolve remained firm. "What do we do?" Samuel considered their options. 3 against 2 aren't great odds. We need to even them up. "How?" "Distraction," Samuel said, his mind working quickly. "I'll create a commotion at the front, draw at least one of them out. When they come to investigate, I'll handle them. You slip in the back and get Mason." Katherine nodded. "All right, but be careful." "Always am," Samuel replied with a grim smile. They separated, with Samuel circling around to the front of the saloon while Katherine positioned herself at the back door. Samuel gathered a handful of small rocks, then threw one at the saloon's swinging doors. The voices inside fell silent. Samuel threw another rock, harder this time. It clattered against the wooden doors loudly. "Go check it out," he heard Mason order from inside. Footsteps approached the door and one of the men appeared, gun drawn. Samuel waited until he stepped fully onto the porch, then emerged from his hiding place. "Looking for me?" he called, the outlaw world, firing a wild shot that splintered the wood beside Samuel's head. Samuel returned fire with precision, his bullet finding its mark. The man collapsed with a cry. Inside, chaos erupted. Samuel ducked for cover as the second outlaw burst through the doors, gun blazing. Samuel rolled beneath the porch and came up behind the man, striking him with the butt of his rifle. The outlaw staggered but didn't fall, turning to grapple with Samuel. They crashed through the saloon doors together, locked in a desperate struggle. Samuel was vaguely aware of Katherine entering through the back, her gun trained on Mason, who stood frozen in surprise, the money scattered across the table before him. "Don't move," Katherine commanded, her voice steady despite the violence unfolding around her. Mason recovered quickly, diving for his gun. Katherine fired, her bullet grazing his arm. Mason howled in pain but managed to grab his weapon. Samuel was still fighting the second outlaw, unable to help Katherine as Mason raised his gun toward her. The moment seemed to stretch endlessly as Samuel watched in horror, knowing he couldn't reach her in time. The shot that rang out came from Katherine's gun. Mason jerked backward, a look of surprise crossing his face before he crumpled to the floor. Samuel finally overcame his opponent with a powerful blow that rendered the man unconscious. He rushed to Katherine's side as she stood trembling, her gun still pointed at Mason's motionless form. "Katherine," Samuel said gently, placing his hand over hers to lower the weapon. "It's over, he's down." She turned to him, her eyes wide with shock. "I shot him. I've never shot anyone before." Samuel checked Mason's pulse. "He's alive, hit him in the shoulder." He quickly bound the outlaw's wound with a bandana, then secured his hands with rope from his pack. "You did what you had to do," Samuel assured her, gathering the scattered money from the table. "You saved your family's ranch and possibly my life." Katherine nodded numbly, the reality of what had transpired beginning to sink in. Samuel counted the money quickly, confirming it was all there, then placed it securely in Katherine's saddlebag. "What do we do with them?" she asked, looking at the 3 outlaws. "The territorial marshal has a station a half-day's ride from here. We'll take them there, then head back to Willow Creek." Samuel bound the other 2 men securely. "They'll face justice for what they've done." As they prepared to leave Deadwood Gulch, loading the outlaws onto their own horses, Katherine grew quiet, her earlier confidence replaced by introspection. "Are you all right?" Samuel asked as they mounted up. "I was just thinking," she replied, looking back at the ghost town. "When I woke up yesterday, I was supposed to become Mrs. Harold Fitzgerald. Instead, I've tracked an outlaw, spent the night in a cave, and shot a man." She shook her head in disbelief. "My life has changed completely in the span of 2 days." Samuel studied her face. "Do you regret coming?" "No," she said without hesitation. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I've made my own choices. done something that matters. She met his gaze steadily. And I've met someone who sees me for who I really am. The journey to the marshal's station was slow, hampered by their need to lead the outlaws' horses. They arrived late in the day, handing over their prisoners and providing statements about the robbery and subsequent events. The marshal, a grizzled veteran of the frontier, shook Samuel's hand vigorously. "Sutherland, heard you were operating in these parts. Didn't know you'd taken to traveling with such lovely company." Katherine blushed under the marshal's appraising look. "Miss Spencer's wedding was interrupted by Mason's robbery," Samuel explained. "She insisted on joining the pursuit." The marshal raised an eyebrow. "Brave woman, your husband must be proud." "I'm not married," Katherine corrected quietly. "The wedding never took place." The marshal glanced between them, a knowing look crossing his weathered face. "I see. Well, you two are welcome to stay the night. Got spare bunks in the back." They accepted gratefully, taking the opportunity to rest and properly tend to their horses before the long ride back to Willow Creek. That evening they sat on the marshal's porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. "Tomorrow we head back," Samuel said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "You'll be returning as a hero, saved your family's ranch." Katherine nodded, but her expression was troubled. "Yes, but—" she hesitated. "What will you do, Samuel, after we return?" He hadn't allowed himself to think that far ahead. "I'm not sure, move on, I suppose, that's what I always do." "Is that what you want?" she asked softly. Samuel looked at her, truly looked at her, taking in the strength and intelligence in her eyes, the gentle curve of her lips, the determination in her jaw. In just 2 days, this woman had appended everything he thought he knew about himself and his solitary existence. "I don't know any more," he admitted. "For the first time in years, I'm not sure where my trail leads next." Katherine's hand found his on the porch railing, her touch warm and steady. Perhaps it leads to Willow Creek, at least for a while." Samuel turned his hand to clasp hers. "People will talk. A woman who left town with one man and returned with another." "Let them talk," Katherine said with sudden fierceness. "I'm tired of living my life according to what others think proper." Samuel smiled, a weight lifting from his chest. "Then I reckon I might stay in Willow Creek." "For a while." They rode out at dawn, taking a different route back to Willow Creek that would shave half a day off their journey. As they traveled, the easy camaraderie they had developed deepened, conversations flowing naturally between periods of comfortable silence. Samuel found himself sharing stories he hadn't told anyone in years about his childhood in Texas. His brief time at university before the war called him away. The dreams he'd once had of becoming a doctor before life had set him on a different path. Katherine, in turn, spoke of growing up on the ranch, her love of books and learning, and her secret desire to someday see the great cities of the East. "My mother was from Boston," she explained as they made camp on the second night of their return journey. "She used to tell me stories about concerts and museums, libraries with more books than I could read in a lifetime." "You should see those things," Samuel said, watching her face glow in the firelight. "There's a whole world beyond Montana territory." Katherine smiled. "Perhaps someday. But for now, my place is at the ranch, helping my family." As they neared Willow Creek on the third day, Katherine grew increasingly pensive. "What do you think people will say when we return?" she asked. "Will they believe we actually caught Mason and recovered the money?" "The marshal will have sent a telegraph," Samuel assured her. "They'll know." "That's not what I meant," Katherine said. "They'll wonder about us, about what happened between us on the trail." Samuel reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her. "Katherine, nothing improper happened between us. You have nothing to be ashamed of." "I know that," she replied, her cheeks coloring slightly. "But that won't stop the gossip. And Harold." "What will I say to Harold? The truth," Samuel said simply. "That you did what was necessary to save your family's ranch, and that in doing so you discovered what you really want from life." Katherine studied him for a long moment. "And what is it that I want, Samuel Sutherland?" He held her gaze steadily. "That's for you to decide." They continued riding, the tension between them a tangible thing now that Willow Creek lay just over the next rise. As they crested the hill, the town came into view, its buildings gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Ready?" Samuel asked. Katherine straightened in her saddle, lifting her chin. "Ready." They rode down the main street side by side, drawing curious stares from townsfolk who stopped their activities to watch their approach. Word of their arrival spread quickly, and by the time they reached the sheriff's office, a crowd had gathered. Katherine's parents pushed through the throng, their faces a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Her father stepped forward as Katherine dismounted. "Katherine," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you're safe." "Yes, Pa," she replied, embracing him tightly, "and I have the money." She retrieved the pouch from her saddlebag and pressed it into his hands. All of it. Her mother enfolded her in a tearful embrace while Samuel stood awkwardly to one side, aware of the many eyes upon him. The sheriff approached, offering his hand. "Marshall sent word yesterday," he said, shaking Samuel's hand firmly. "Said you two captured not just Mason but two of his gang as well. Impressive work." "It was Miss Spencer who shot Mason," Samuel said, nodding toward Katherine. "She's the real hero of this story." The crowd murmured in surprise, and Katherine's father looked at his daughter with new respect in his eyes. From the edge of the gathering, Harold Fitzgerald appeared, making his way toward Katherine with determined steps. He stopped before her, straightening his vest nervously. "Katherine," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "I'm relieved to see you returned safely. This adventure is over now. We can reschedule the wedding for next Sunday if that suits." A hush fell over the crowd as all eyes turned to Katherine. She stood tall, her gaze unwavering as she faced the man she had nearly married. "No, Harold," she said clearly. "I won't be marrying you next Sunday or any day." Harold's face flushed red. "Now see here, Katherine, you've had a trying experience, but that's no reason to make hasty decisions." "Think of your family, your reputation." "I am thinking of my family," Katherine interrupted. "And of myself. These past days have shown me what truly matters. I want a life with purpose and passion, not a marriage of convenience." Harold's expression hardened. "Is it him?" he demanded, jerking his head toward Samuel. "Has this drifter turned your head with tales of adventure?" Samuel stepped forward, but Katherine placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. "This is between Harold and me," she said quietly. Turning back to Harold, she spoke with dignity. "My decision has nothing to do with Mr. Sutherland and everything to do with what I want for my future. I'm sorry, Harold, but I won't marry a man who abandoned me at the first sign of trouble." Whispers rippled through the crowd as Harold stood speechless, his humiliation complete. After a moment, he turned on his heel and stalked away, the crowd parting to let him pass. Katherine's mother touched her daughter's arm. "Katherine, what have you done?" "The bank loans are secure," her father interrupted, holding up the money pouch. "Thanks to our daughter's courage. The rest can wait until we're home." As the crowd dispersed, Katherine turned to Samuel. "Will you come to the ranch tomorrow? I'd like you to see it." Samuel nodded, acutely aware of her parents' curious gazes. "I'd be honored." That night, Samuel sat alone in his hotel room, contemplating the day's events and the uncertain future that lay ahead. He had never intended to stay in Willow Creek, never planned to develop feelings for a woman he barely knew. Yet here he was, unable to imagine riding away from Katherine Spencer. A knock at his door startled him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Katherine standing in the hallway, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "Katherine," he said in surprise, "is everything all right? May I come in?" she asked. When he hesitated, she added, "Just to talk, please." Samuel stepped aside, closing the door behind her. Katherine moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit street below. "My parents want me to reconsider Harold's proposal," she said without preamble. "They say one moment of cowardice shouldn't erase months of courtship." Samuel kept his distance, though every instinct urged him to go to her. "And what do you say?" Katherine turned to face him. "I told them I can't marry a man I don't love, especially not when—" She faltered. "When what?" Samuel prompted softly. when I might be falling in love with someone else," she finished, her eyes meeting his directly. Samuel's heart hammered in his chest. "Katherine, I have nothing to offer you, no land, no prospects, just a horse and a reputation. I don't want your possessions, Samuel, I want you. Your courage, your honesty, your heart." She took a step toward him. "Unless I've misread everything between us these past days." "You haven't," he admitted, closing the distance between them, "but you deserve better than a drifter with a violent past." Katherine placed her hand on his chest, directly over his heart. "I deserve a man who sees me for who I truly am, who stands beside me as an equal, who doesn't flinch from danger." She smiled up at him. "Sound like anyone you know?" Samuel covered her hand with his own. "You're asking me to change my entire life. I'm asking you to consider building a new one with me." He searched her face, finding nothing but sincerity in her gaze. Slowly, he bent his head and kissed her, a gentle meeting of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate. Katherine responded eagerly, her arms encircling his neck as she pressed closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "If we do this, there will be talk, scandal." "Let them talk," Katherine whispered. "Some things are worth any price." The next morning, Samuel rode out to the Spencer ranch as promised. Katherine was waiting for him on the porch, her face lighting up as he approached. She gave him a tour of the property, the sprawling pastures, the sturdy barn, the bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived. "It's impressive," Samuel said as they walked along a fence line overlooking grazing cattle. "Your father has built something remarkable here." "He wants to meet with you," Katherine said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "After dinner tonight." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Should I be concerned?" "No," Katherine replied with a small smile. "He was impressed by what you did, by how you helped me when others wouldn't." Dinner that evening was a surprisingly comfortable affair. Katherine's mother had prepared a feast, and her younger brothers peppered Samuel with questions about his tracking experiences. By the time the meal ended, Samuel felt more at ease than he had expected. As the women cleared the table, Katherine's father invited Samuel to join him on the porch for a cigar. "I'm not one to beat around the bush, Sutherland," the older man said once they were seated. "My daughter tells me you two have formed an attachment." Samuel nodded. "Yes, sir. Though it wasn't my intention when I offered to help her." "I believe you," Mr. Spencer said, puffing thoughtfully on his cigar. "Katherine has always known her own mind, stubborn as her mother, that one." "She's remarkable," Samuel agreed. "She is, and she deserves a good life. Better than what Harold Fitzgerald could have given her, I see that now." He fixed Samuel with a penetrating stare. "But what can you offer her? From what I hear, you've never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots." Samuel considered his answer carefully. "Until now, I've never had a reason to stay anywhere, but your daughter. She makes me want to build something lasting." "Fine words," Mr. Spencer acknowledged, "but I need more than words if you're asking for my blessing." "I understand," Samuel said. "I have savings. Not much, but enough to buy a small spread, or," he hesitated, "or to invest in an existing ranch that might need an extra hand." Katherine's father raised his eyebrows. "You'd consider ranching. It's hard work, different from tracking outlaws." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Samuel replied. "And I know cattle, worked enough drives to understand the business." Mr. Spencer was quiet for a long moment, studying Samuel thoughtfully. "The north pasture," he said finally. "It's been sitting unused since my oldest boy moved to California. 100 acres, good water access. Could support a decent herd with the right management." Samuel stared at him in surprise. "Sir, I'm offering you a partnership, Sutherland. You invest your savings, work the land, build a house there for my daughter. In time, if you prove yourself, we discuss a larger stake in the ranch." "That's more than generous," Samuel said, stunned by the offer. Mr. Spencer tamped out his cigar. "Katherine is my only daughter. Her happiness means everything to me. If you're the man she's chosen, I'll do what I can to make it work." His expression hardened slightly. "But understand this, if you hurt her, if you leave her, there's nowhere in this territory you could hide from me." "I understand, sir," Samuel said solemnly, "and I accept your offer with gratitude." The two men shook hands just as Katherine stepped onto the porch. She looked between them anxiously. "Everything all right out here?" she asked. Her father smiled. "Just discussing business with Mr. Sutherland. It seems we might have a new partner at the Spencer Ranch." Katherine's eyes widened as she turned to Samuel. "Really, you're staying?" "If you'll have me," Samuel replied, his heart in his eyes. Mr. Spencer cleared his throat. "I'll leave you two to talk. Don't stay out too late, Katherine. There's work to be done tomorrow." As her father went inside, Katherine moved to Samuel's side, her face glowing with happiness. "You're really going to stay, become a rancher?" Samuel took her hands in his. "I'm going to build us a home, Katherine, right here on your family's land, if that's what you want." "It's everything I want," she whispered. "But what about your tracking work? Won't you miss the freedom of the trail?" Samuel smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "The only freedom that matters is the freedom to choose your own path, and I choose you, Katherine Spencer, for as long as you'll have me." Over the next few weeks, news of their courtship spread throughout Willow Creek. As Katherine had predicted, there was gossip whispers about the broken engagement with Harold, speculation about what had really happened during those days on the trail. But as spring turned to summer, the talk gradually subsided. Samuel threw himself into ranch work, impressing even the most skeptical hands with his knowledge and work ethic. He began construction on a small house at the edge of the north pasture, with Katherine riding out daily to monitor progress and offer suggestions. Harold Fitzgerald left town in May, returning east after selling his interest in the bank. The loans for the Spencer Ranch were secured through the new manager, who proved more reasonable in his terms. By midsummer, the house was nearly complete, a modest but sturdy structure with a wide porch facing the mountains. Samuel stood on that porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the distant peaks in gold, when he heard the approach of Katherine's horse. She dismounted gracefully and joined him on the porch, slipping her arm through his. "It's beautiful," she said, admiring the view. "You chose the perfect spot." "It reminded me of where we camped that first night," Samuel admitted, "when I realized I was falling in love with you." Katherine leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never thanked you properly, you know." "For what?" "For being there that day, for helping me when my world fell apart." She turned to face him fully. "If Billy Mason hadn't robbed me, if my veil hadn't been torn, if you hadn't stepped forward, I'd be married to Harold now, living a life that wasn't truly mine." Samuel cupped her face gently. "Sometimes the worst moments lead us to the best ones." "Samuel," Katherine said, her voice suddenly serious, "I don't want to wait any longer. The house is nearly finished. The north pasture is ready for cattle. There's nothing standing in our way." "What are you saying?" Samuel asked, though he already knew the answer. "Marry me, not next month or next season, now, this week." Samuel laughed softly. "Aren't I supposed to be the one asking?" Katherine smiled. "When have we ever done things the traditional way?" "Fair point," Samuel conceded. He took her hands in his. "Katherine Spencer, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife this week?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. The wedding was held the following Saturday on the Spencer Ranch, beneath an arch of wildflowers with the mountains as their backdrop. Unlike Katherine's previous wedding, this one was a simple affair. Family, close friends, and ranch hands gathered to witness their vows. Katherine wore a dress of pale blue instead of white, her honey blonde hair adorned with forget-me-nots. Samuel, unaccustomed to formal attire, nevertheless looked handsome in a new suit, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. As Katherine walked toward him on her father's arm, Samuel felt a certainty he had never known before. This woman, brave, determined, compassionate, had changed him irrevocably. For the first time since the war, he felt truly at peace. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel lifted Katherine's face to his and kissed her tenderly, sealing their vows before the assembled guests. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with dancing in the barn and enough food to feed the entire county. As dusk fell, Samuel led Katherine away from the festivities, helping her onto his horse before mounting behind her. "Where are we going?" she asked as they rode away from the lights and music. "Home," Samuel replied simply, guiding his horse toward their newly finished house on the north pasture. When they arrived, Samuel lifted Katherine into his arms and carried her across the threshold. Inside, he had prepared a surprise. The front room was filled with wildflowers, and a small table was set with wine and cake saved from the wedding feast. "It's perfect," Katherine whispered, turning in a slow circle to take in their new home. "Not quite," Samuel said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a delicate gold chain with a small pearl pendant. "This belonged to my mother. I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right person to give it to." Katherine's eyes filled with tears as he fastened the necklace around her throat. "It's beautiful, Samuel. Thank you." He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and passion. Katherine responded eagerly, her arms encircling his neck as she pressed against him. "Mrs. Sutherland," he murmured against her lips. "Has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Katherine smiled. "I think it sounds perfect." They stood in the center of their new home, wrapped in each other's arms, the future stretching before them like the vast Montana sky full of promise, adventure, and abiding love. 5 years later, Samuel stood on the porch of their expanded homestead, watching as Katherine taught their 4-year-old son, James, to ride his pony in the fenced yard. Their 2-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, sat on a blanket nearby, carefully examining a wildflower with serious concentration. The north pasture had flourished under their care, now supporting a healthy herd that had made them partners in the most successful ranch in the county. The house had grown along with their family additional rooms, a larger kitchen, and a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Katherine looked up, catching Samuel's eye across the yard. Even after 5 years of marriage, the sight of her smile still took his breath away. She said something to James, then walked toward the porch, her stride confident despite her advancing pregnancy with their 3rd child. "Daydreaming again, Mr. Sutherland?" she teased as she joined him, leaning against the porch railing. "Remembering," he corrected, slipping his arm around her waist. "The day we met, the torn veil, the chase," Katherine's expression softened. "The day my life truly began." Samuel placed his hand gently on her rounded belly. "Any regrets about giving up the chance to see those cities you dreamed of?" "None," she said firmly. "We've built something here that matters, something lasting." She covered his hand with her own. "Besides, there's still time for adventures." "When the children are older." Samuel kissed her temple. "Wherever you want to go, Katherine, I'll take you there." "I already have everything I need," she replied, leaning into his embrace as they watched their children play in the golden afternoon light. From catastrophe had come their greatest blessing, a life neither of them had imagined. That day in Willow Creek, when a torn veil and a stolen fortune had set them on a shared path. The road had not always been easy, but every challenge had only strengthened the bond between them. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Samuel and Katherine Sutherland stood together on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, their hearts as full as the Montana sky was vast. The bride with the torn veil, who had hidden her face in shame that day, had found not just her family's fortune, but a love worth any price. And the drifting cowboy who had kissed her before the crowd had found the home he never knew he was searching for in her arms, on this land, with these children who carried their shared legacy into the future. In the end, it was not gold or land or cattle that had made them rich, but the love they had found in each other, a love born in chaos, tempered by adventure, and destined to endure through all the seasons of their lives.